At the end of every single Formula One season, the teams turn their attention to next year's cars, and 2022 is no exception to that. Going into the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, quite a few teams turned up with lots of little detail changes and new parts on their car, though a lot of them weren't immediately apparent, such as the changes made to one of the Ferraris. But one car that had really visible changes was the McLaren, and Craig, we really did get to see how different those floors could be.
Yeah, McLaren, completely new floor edge, and I think this is actually aimed at 2023 rather than performance this weekend. And what we're looking at is what we call the floor edge here. And you can see all the way back to that little cutout there, it's almost a perfectly flat, straight edge. And this partly goes into the new regulations. I suspect this is about 25 millimeters higher than it was for their normal floor edge, so that they can test the aero effect of this on track, get that data, compare it to the aero testing back at the wind tunnel in CFD, make sure everything is lining up ready for next year.
Absolutely, and if we take a closer look at what they normally had and actually what they had on the other car, this is what we're accustomed to seeing late in the season for McLaren. You've got this section of floor here, which I like to call the viaduct section. So you have this upper flick up section and then these sections that come down all the way along, which make it look a little bit like a railway viaduct, certainly a very crudely drawn one. But you've also got these remote bridge sections along the side of the floor. Those are something that pretty much every team picked up after testing and started to develop all the way through the season. But if you take a close look at the same area of the floor on the new version, look, this entire viaduct section has been filled in. They still have these cutouts that we've seen develop, but McLaren clearly looking at a more simple floor, which will almost certainly produce a little bit less downforce. And if you look towards the rear of the floor, the story's the same. No bridge section. In fact, you can see where they've cut it out, and long gone is that viaduct section. So you can see how the team have glued in these new parts, these development parts, onto their car for free practice at Abu Dhabi only. Now, Craig, the floor is one of the biggest areas of change for 2023, and that change was introduced partway through the 2022 season. It wasn't an expected change, but the floor edge is going to be very, very different next year, isn't it?
It is, and this is all done as part of the porpoising problem. So they've lifted the floor edge ever so much slightly and the diffuser itself. So in this drawing I've done here, you can see the yellow section of the floor, the Venturi section. Now the bottom line of that floor, the floor edge, which used to be as low as the rest of the car, has now been raised by 25 millimeters, which will let a bit more air come and go underneath, but also stop that floor hitting the track, which is the key point. And then you have the top line of the tunnels as well. That's what they call the throat, the narrowest part, just midway along the floor. And that throat has been raised as well, in line with the edge of the floor. Again, trying to stop the floor being so sensitive to being next to the track surface, instigating porpoising or instigating some instability in the car.
Now, that's not the only area of change for the 2023 technical regulations. One of the biggest areas of change we're going to see, well, it should be visible, but we're not quite sure yet, actually is going to be on this area of the car here, around the roll hoop. We saw that enormous accident for the Alfa Romeo of Guan Yu Zhou at Silverstone on the opening lap. Now, the roll hoop there in that situation failed after the car dug into the ground. The FIA have taken a look at that and have introduced some more stringent tests for that part of the car. It's really safety critical. So whether those blade-type roll hoops will still be possible with the new regulations is a matter that's, well, we don't actually know whether you can still do that. We'll see what the new cars look like. But there are other changes around different parts of the car. For example, the front wing end plates, there's some detailed changes to the regulation there. There's some changes around the cockpit itself. But most importantly for me, from a visual point of view at least, there's some pretty significant changes to the wing mirrors, Craig.
Yes, there are, and it's a story that's been going on for a long time. Not just the sort of strange aerodynamics that are going on there, but also the driver's ability to see behind them. Now, Formula One mirrors have grown since they used to be kind of little tiny square things back in the 80s, and now they're these oblong shapes. But the FIA have stepped in, decided to test, and we saw that earlier this year, larger mirrors. And as you can see over on your side, Sam, that is the new size mirror and in its new position. And what they've done is previously the mirrors were able to fit somewhere within a box at the side of the car, which meant they could play about with the height, play about with the bodywork. But you still ended up with the same tiny little mirror. Now the mirror size fills that available box. So you can't play about with the position, but there's still some scope there for you to play about with the shape of the mirror housing, trying to minimise its impact.
Yeah, we've already seen some teams starting to play around it. At the Dutch Grand Prix, a lot of the teams tested their different mirror configurations. Aston Martin was one of the clearest. That's their standard 2022 mirror. But the 2023 mirror, clearly much bigger, clearly very complicated. So that's a real sneak peek into next year's Aston Martin design, and probably one of the most finished 2023 parts we're going to see so far. It's going to be a while till we see the final 2023 cars, early in the new year when the cars start to launch. The rulebook is largely similar, but the devil, as ever, is in the details. And with different wind tunnel restrictions affecting different teams, we could see a real rebalancing of the order. It's going to be really exciting, and I think there's going to be no less innovations in 2023 than there were in 2022.